January 24, 2014, Miriam received a call demanding $2,000 to release her daughter. She paid the ransom but never saw her daughter again. Determined, she captured 10 cartel members, seeking justice on her own. This is the story of Miriam Rodriguez, the Mexican activist who took on the Zetas cartel. The beginning of a nightmare. A group of men emerge from a building and climb into a tinted glass Lobo truck. Some of them carry AK-47 rifles, while others have handguns. They start the vehicle and quickly accelerate, leaving tire marks on the ground. As they head towards the San Fernando Highway in Tamaulipas, Mexico, some sing along to Mexican songs, laugh, and discuss.
Getting this done quickly.
Suddenly, a silhouette becomes visible on the road. A young woman. The men slow down and turn off the lights. The girl turns around in fear. The two of these men catch her before she can start running. With laughter, they immobilize her body and cover her mouth. They lift her into the truck, close the doors, and speed off again. The place is empty, and this situation goes unnoticed. This is the daily operation of the Zetas cartel, one of many stories, but its ending will set off an extraordinary tale. March 23, 2014, in San Fernando, Tamaulipas, Miriam Rodriguez's phone rings. It's an unknown number. With some hesitation, she picks up the phone, answers, and her eyes gaze out the window of her home. Her gaze becomes lost momentarily, and her face changes expression. Fear and anguish manifest. The call's brief, maybe 2 minutes, but the message is clear.
We took your daughter and we want a $2,000 ransom.
Before the call ends, someone on the other end of the line calls out for Sama, followed by the beep of a disconnected phone line. Miriam enters a state of panic and immediately begins calling for help. But her case becomes just one of the hundreds of disappearances happening in Mexico. The only alternative is to find money to secure her daughter's rescue. In 2014, during this period, the Zetas, a Mexican cartel, were engaged in a battle against the Gulf Cartel, another criminal group with whom they had previously had a business relationship. During this time, the municipality of San Fernando became a victim of this dispute. Innocent people were killed, and robberies and extortions became an everyday occurrence. Whether to fund the war, instill terror in society, or even for the amusement of these groups. With the hope of recovering their 20-year-old daughter, Miriam and her husband gathered the money, following the instructions, and left it near the health center in San Fernando. The deal concluded with releasing the young woman in the local cemetery. However, days and weeks passed, and they never saw their daughter again. After the initial payment, more men called Miriam.
Give us more money and we assure you we'll free your daughter.
As time passed, Miriam began to lose hope, but it's hard to stay calm when you don't know if your daughter will return home. However, one day, resignation settled in her mind. That morning at her daughter's house, May Azalea assured her that Karen would never return, and that she was likely already dead. Later, the truth would come to light, confirming that her daughter had been killed shortly after the kidnapping. With anger, sadness, and resentment, Miriam vowed to seek justice with her own hands. She embarked on a well-structured plan to locate these criminals involved and ensure their imprisonment. Her only lead, the person with the nickname Sama. The path to justice. That name kept echoing in her mind, Sama. But how could she find a person with that name among millions of Mexicans? Melancholic and filled with anger, Miriam constantly checked her murdered daughter's Facebook profile. Yeah, imagine going through that after knowing what happened to your daughter and dealing with the non-existent time displayed on her social media when she was still alive. While navigating this platform, she found a photo tagged with that same name, Sama. In seconds, she recognized this man and began identifying the location. An ice cream parlor in Ciudad Victoria, a city 2 hours away from San Fernando. The photo showed a young woman dressed in the uniform of that establishment. Miriam had found the first step in her investigation. For weeks, Miriam visited this ice cream parlor at different times and days, gradually learning the schedule of the young woman and hoping that one day Sama would appear at this place. On a lucky day, the couple showed up at the location, and Miriam finally heard the address of their private residence after discreetly following them. However, the police would only intervene once they had more concrete information, such as this person's real name or any other details that would prove their criminality. This is where one of Miriam's many physical transformations began, as she sought to change her appearance and not be easily recognized. To get closer to Sama and gather more information, Miriam dyed her hair red, retrieved a uniform from a previous position she held at the Ministry of Health, used an identification card that could pass as legitimate to the eyes of others, and started conducting a series of supposed housing surveys in the neighborhood. This way, she obtained basic details about Sama. Armed with a file containing photographs, data, addresses, and phone numbers, Miriam approached various municipal, state, and federal authorities, but none of them showed any interest. This may seem unbelievable and ridiculous, but Miriam constantly encountered no as the answer from the sources. However, one officer empathized with her case and began to help her. After some time, an arrest warrant was finally issued for Sama, but he had already gone on the run. Feeling powerless yet filled with more anger, Miriam didn't abandon her work. With limited resources and starting from scratch, she continued her efforts to locate the fugitive. Coincidence. It's often said that everyone eventually receives what they deserve based on their actions. September 15th is celebrated in Mexico as Independence Day. Miriam's family owned a clothing, hats, and boots business in Ciudad Victoria. Just before closing, Miriam's son, Luis, noticed a young man browsing their merchandise. Without getting too close, Luis took another look, moved around from different angles, and realized it was Sama. Without delay, but remaining calm, Miriam's family contacted the police and eventually Sama was apprehended. At this moment, a door opened for Miriam's investigation, as during police interrogation, Sama revealed the names and locations of other men involved in Karen's kidnapping and murder. This allowed Miriam to continue and complete the details of her work, determined to see these men arrested and achieve justice for her daughter. Rebuilding their daily lives. Miriam says goodbye to a tall, dark-skinned young man at the San Fernando market. She's just jotted down a specific address in a small notebook, the same notebook where she'd recorded all sorts of data for her investigation: addresses, names, phone numbers, and work schedules of the individuals involved in her daughter's murder. Yeah, invaluable information to achieve her purpose. As she's walking towards the exit, her left hand grips a pistol concealed in the pocket of her trench coat. She strolls, seemingly unconcerned. No one would suspect a 55-year-old woman in her plan to apprehend criminals. Recently, Miriam has learned that one of these men has left his involvement in drug trafficking and now sells flowers. She's been investigating this matter. The young man she said goodbye to at the market is a relative of hers, whom she could contact after speaking with more people, unwittingly gathering all the possible details to know when and where to locate the man implicated in her daughter's murder. It's the summer of 2017. For the past 3 years, Miriam has dedicated herself to tracking each of those involved in the crime. So far, half of them have been detained thanks to her actions. However, she aims to achieve justice and only rest once these men pay for their crimes. It's 7 o'clock in the evening, and Miriam's walking towards the designated location. On this occasion, she's worn a hat, a scarf, and a jacket to change her appearance and avoid quick recognition. While walking in search of the person implicated in her daughter's murder, she notices that the person was further ahead, selling other products. She approached him, and the man recognized Miriam. He started running but was caught by her, and she swiftly brings him down. Without drawing a pistol from her trench coat, Miriam threatened the man, saying,
"If you move, I'll kill you right here."
The man was paralyzed, and shortly after the police arrived, and he was arrested. In this way, Miriam has tracked down her daughter's killers. Some have severed ties with the Mexican cartel and have attempted to rebuild their lives after working for this organized crime group. From 2014 to 2017, Miriam captured 10 of these men alone. Her activism positioned her as a role model for society. Still, at the same time, it placed her in a vulnerable position. By challenging a cartel, her situation is put at risk. However, nothing would stop her from achieving her purpose. The sudden prison break. In March 2017, 29 inmates from the state prison in Ciudad Victoria escaped through a 40-meter-long tunnel. 4 were identified as part of a criminal organization. You can probably guess which cartel they belonged to. And according to authorities, the prison had a capacity for 800 inmates. But due to the high crime rate, it was overcrowded with an additional 160 inmates. Society at large deemed this negligence as adding to the disorder, chaos, and the government's lack of interest in addressing crime and control in prisons. Following their escape, Ciudad Victoria and San Fernando communities reported clashes in various locations and constant looting and robberies. However, the worst was yet to come. Along their path, these individuals also murdered innocent people while seeking retribution against anyone who had crossed their way in the past. And you can imagine who they targeted, knowing that their actions had led to the arrest of several of their associates. Due to these circumstances, Miriam sought help from the Mexican government out of fear of being targeted by individuals linked to the Mexican cartel. It was no secret that she had dedicated herself to tracking down every person connected to her daughter. And thanks to her efforts, she had managed to capture several of them, seeking justice on her own, being an example for many and a figure of reference for activists. The government provided her with a team of bodyguards working her security day and night. However, on a symbolic day for Mexicans, May 10th, Mother's Day, Miriam was shot and killed outside her home. Thus, her pursuit of justice had ended, but not her legacy and memory. After the death. Having captured more than half of those involved in her daughter's murder, Miriam Rodriguez became a social icon in San Fernando and throughout Mexico. Her story became a reference point internationally for various associations and activist groups for missing persons. However, pursuing justice was a tragic price for Miriam and her family. Disappearances in Mexico increased after the government period of former President Felipe Calderón implemented a political strategy for the so-called war on drugs. This led to numerous uprisings and armed conflicts throughout Mexico, evidenced by disputes, deaths, and the discovery of many clandestine graves across the country. The main reason behind this measure was the realization that Mexico had transitioned from being a producer and transit country to becoming a drug consumer, where drug sales and consumption were affecting adults and children. However, many Mexicans would regret this decision and its implementation due to the mentioned consequences. The situation in San Fernando was no exception, and impunity took its toll. It was 10 p.m. on May 10, 2017. Miriam was arriving home to meet her husband. Days earlier, Miriam had broken her leg while chasing a woman involved in her daughter's murder, so she limped as she walked and used crutches. A white Nissan van parked on the other side as she carefully exited her vehicle to avoid further injury. Inside were 3 men who escaped prison and were linked to Karen's crime. Without a word, they approached Miriam, and before she could react, they shot her 13 times and fled. The scene: Miriam lying facing down on the sidewalk, clutching a gun in her coat pocket that she couldn't draw. In a matter of months, 2 of the culprits were apprehended, and 1 was shot. Impunity prevailed. Those who ordered the act remained protected by silence and the support of others. The violent death of Miriam sparked outrage across Mexico. Once again, impunity prevailing over justice, highlighting the Mexican government's challenges in dealing with organized crime. After her death, Miriam's son Luis sought to find the culprits, but even he had learned the lesson.
Confronting a criminal cartel is no easy task.